Hey, it's Dan Moralez. This is Homebuyer Radio. This is episode number 142. And so every so often, I like to force some of my real estate partners to come in and hang out with me and share their wisdom and insight into the market. And so I forced her to come on and do this before, and I managed to get her to come back and do it again. Rebecca Perkins is here with me today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for coming in. Of course, the check's in the mail, right?
Mm-hmm. You know it.
It's like a typical mortgage guy. The check's in the mail. So this week, I always like to get kind of a read on what's going on in the market and good stuff like that. But before we do that, I don't know that you and I ever really talked about some of this stuff. So, what got you into real estate? What was that thing where you're like, I feel like this is what I really want to do for a living?
I can't say that ever actually happened. I come from education, so I taught middle school for 3 years, and then I stopped teaching and was going to go back to school full time to become a counselor and stay in the school system. And then my husband, honestly, is the one that just said, hey, I think you'd be good at real estate. And I thought he was crazy. I don't feel like I'm really a sales type person. Like, I don't think of myself as a salesperson, and I think real estate is a lot about relationships and listening to people's wants and needs and what they're looking for, and patience, and actually a lot of traits from teaching definitely come into play. So anyway, I've been in it 17 years at this point, and don't regret it for a second.
Yeah, wow. I can't believe it's been 17 years. Holy cow.
Shoot, I just dated myself.
That's okay. I always tell people, I've been in the mortgage business. I think this is year 29. And I'm like, people are like surprised, like, you're actually that old. I'm like, yeah, I am.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yes, I'm the old dog here. But, it's interesting to me, because you hit on, the part that, it's you're not a salesperson, right? Like, and I think the best agents are the people that don't look at it as a sales job as much as you're like a problem solver.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely a lot of problem solving, for sure.
Yeah, it is. Because I think every transaction has its own unique set of challenges and things that are part of getting something to close, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the the very emotional side of real estate.
Yes, that's a huge factor. I mean, for a lot of people, this is the biggest purchase that they are or may make in their life. So of course, it's very emotional.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think a lot of times, one of your clients I met with yesterday, we were talking and. We were talking about the emotional side. He's like, I'm like a kid that, is waiting to get the gift on Christmas, for closing and that,
Yeah. Yes.
He's like, I got this. He's like, I can't sleep. For me, doing this day in, day out, I forget about that. I'm like, I sometimes
I do as well. Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, you're going to close on such and such date, and here's what we got to do to get there. And sometimes you can get lost in what we do day in and day out, where it can be easy to forget, like, our clients don't do this every day,
mm-hmm.
So it can be very, very emotional.
Yes.
for them. And, in that emotional piece, it can go deep when somebody's, selling a house that they've had for forever, or it was a house that their kids grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be an interesting process, I think, sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm glad I can be there for the people and just walk them through it. But there are a lot of things about their lives that come out during the process that they might not share with other people. Whether it's what's going on in their life and their family, their financial situation. So it's a big deal all around.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, when I think of interviewing for agents or people to partner with, for, somebody's looking to sell a house or buy a house, you want somebody who can kind of help you through that process as well, too. That's an important aspect. I think a lot of times people don't think about, what is this person like as a person? Do I like them? Do I want to do business with them?
Right.
There's some agents we work with that are they're not as interested in their clients or what happens for their clients as far as life and the big picture, as much as they are very transaction and task oriented. And I think that people part of it is really part of the special sauce of what you do. and separates you from a lot of people, because not all of the folks that you compete with in the marketplace do that or do it very well like you do. And I know you do it very well because you've had to deal with me as a client.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
One of those hard ones.
I would say on that, like just referrals in general, I think you need to listen to those people that have been in the business because they experience it. My experiences with you. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I've got a lender, I'm good," but they don't know what they don't know until they're in too deep, and then it's too late to change at that point. And this is what I do day in and day out, and I've seen it all, as have you, and you deal with different agents all of the time, and you just have a better inside view of what is a good agent as I do a lender. And I do think it is important to go on referrals and not just go with somebody just because, or it's a family member and you feel obligated, and sometimes that backfires.
And then you like feel bad too, like when they do a bad job. You feel bad like calling them out on so I've had that. I have one client that his mother-in-law is a realtor, and I know he doesn't ever want to work with her, but he's like afraid not to. and so he always does. And I always get kind of a chuckle because he's so detailed and just really on point, and his mother-in-law is just not. So it's kind of funny to watch that sometimes when they do a transaction. I've done a few for him, and I just sit back and laugh. I'm like, I feel bad for him.
Yeah,
I know he's just taking one for the team because he has to. So when you look at it, what do you think is like the biggest challenge of what you do? If you were to peg it, what do you think is the hardest part of being a realtor and working with clients? What would you say is the most difficult thing?
I would say probably at the beginning of the transaction. Like once you find something, it's helping them understand what the real estate market is at that time. And it is crazy how much it changes every few months.
Yep.
And I do feel like the public is a little bit behind
absolutely
the actual real estate market and what's happening. So I would say negotiating. And, a buyer may think, oh, I can totally go in at that, or I don't have to go over asking price, or I want X, Y, Z. And I think just educating them on what is happening at that time and what you could actually pull off, what's reasonable, and that sort of thing. So I would say at the beginning of a transaction, once they finally find something, working through that process with them, because what my suggestions are may not be what they had in mind and thought that they could get more off or what have you. And that's just not always the case.
Yep. Well, and that's one of the things I know is that you're really good at, kind of setting, here's what's reasonable and what we can probably get done. Having just negotiated the sale of my condo with you, you helped me to guide through that process where in my mind, I might have a set of thoughts, and because I don't do the real estate side, I don't know what is reasonable, what's unreasonable. I have an idea of what I think it is, but I don't always know. When it comes to mortgages, I'm great at that, but the real estate side, right? And that's another, I guess, point for those of you who own a house and you're thinking about selling. Maybe this idea of selling for sale by owner comes into your head. As somebody who works in the industry. I work in industry. I still chose to hire a realtor, even though I know how to write up the contract. I
good
know how
example.
To,
this is good.
How to do all of that stuff. I still chose to hire a realtor because it's outside of my scope of expertise. Even though I would know enough to be dangerous and get a transaction done, but I wouldn't have had the same reach. I wouldn't have had the same opportunity to get my house in front of as many people. I don't have the same resources and tools you do to expose that property to a much bigger audience, which, in all honesty, or the person that bought it, had an agent from far outside the area that represented them. They likely never would have seen my property if I tried to sell it for sale by owner. And I didn't have the time. There's all of these things I didn't have the ability to do near as well as you. And there was a real value to me in saying, hey, I need to have somebody who knows what they're doing do this versus myself thinking that I can find my way through it. And if I'm somebody in the industry that, would know how to get across the finish line and I choose not to do it, for somebody who's not in the industry, who doesn't know how to do it, I'm just like, this is a really clear, example of why you shouldn't try to sell your house on your own.
Yeah.
I think, too often, people think that, it's simple, it's easy, the market's this, that, or the other thing. Maybe talk a little bit about, you alluded to the fact that the market is, it changes. It can be very fluid. You can see changes, over a relatively short period of time. What have you seen as kind of the most recent, kind of trends, as we transition into, this fall marketplace?
Excuse me. Well, one thing I want to, I guess, rewind just a little bit. You talk about a lot of people thinking for sale by owner, it's easy. Let me just find a buyer and then, there's nothing to it. I think one factor that you were talking about earlier is the emotional factor of it.
Absolutely.
And if you are selling for sale by owner, it's really difficult to make a business decision when you're emotionally involved. You get to know the people and their family and what their situation is, or if they have something sad, or you just really like them. You may not get the best price for your house because you don't want to go back to them, or something from the home inspection. You as a buyer may not ask for something to be done because you're afraid to ask, and you as the seller, you may not be making the best business transaction decisions because of the emotional factor.
Yeah, because it's a different type of relationship.
It is.
Because you're dealing directly with them.
Yes, and it's your biggest possession. So you have a lot of pride in what you have. And so I think that is a big factor that people underestimate until they're in the situation. Yeah,
I would agree because I think you're 100% right. People don't think about that. And I think you have a lot of would-be buyers that maybe wouldn't even look at your property because they just don't want to. It's awkward for them to come to the house with you being there.
Right.
That's something that I think, a lot of times people don't think about either. That, they don't want to go look at it with you there. And then, they don't even want to try to negotiate with you.
Right. And, people doing for sale by owners, you bring that point up. But, doing an open house as a for sale by owner. And people aren't going to be honest with you and tell you that your house smells like pet, or they'll just be like, it's great. It's really nice. But then nobody's writing an offer on it, but you don't actually know why, because they're not going to be honest with you because it's awkward, right?
Yeah, they're not.
I mean, if it's an agent, you'll be like this, that, ABC. I don't like this. This is awkward. I mean, they're way more willing to be honest with you, which you can pass on to their agent versus doing it yourself.
Yep. And a lot of times too, it's, I think, when you look at that aspect, but then there's also the pricing aspect, right? Because people, think a property's worth X because, they went on some website or, somebody else gave them, this, piece of information that makes them think that, because I've seen clients, well, my neighbor's house sold for X number of dollars. Well, that's great, but you didn't know that your neighbor's house, was far superior to yours.
Or 200 or 300 square feet bigger.
Yeah, because that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all.
Right.
So it's all those things that, people fall into. And, the flip side too, for somebody who's buying, if they're looking to go buy a house and that house is for sale by owner, you don't have representation to make sure that contractually everything was put together, following kind of what the norm is for the area. Because I've had transactions where people buy a property for sale by owner. The contract is written up by the seller. In some cases, the seller is far more savvy than the buyer.
Right.
And it's written.
That's a good point.
It's written in terms that are far, I should say, they're significantly unfavorable for the buyer. Mm-hmm. But the buyer doesn't know because they don't know what's normal.
Right.
And they assume certain things and. Come to find out, they ended up paying, for cost or things that wouldn't have been, typical as part of a normal real estate transaction. Mm-hmm. So it's all these things that, when you try to do something, by yourself, for sale by owner, you may think you're saving some money, but in all honesty, you're typically not. And, if you're a seller, you can oftentimes leave money on the table. If you're a buyer, you may have incurred cost or had, items in the contract that are unfavorable to you that in the end ended up costing you money, when it's all said and done. Talk a little bit about the market, right? So you're talking about the market, can change. What do you see, kind of as we head into the fall here? What are you seeing in the market?
I would say this time of year, you don't typically see as many homes come on the market as you would, let's say, March, April, May. But I would say that that's typical of the market. I would say you're also starting to see some price reductions because homes have definitely been creeping up there over the past couple of years in price. And now we're starting to see some price reductions. Reality is starting to set in. I think that that's what you're seeing. I would say overall, the market's still doing very well and moving at a pretty good, steady pace. The higher up price points, depending on where you live, can be a little bit slower than the lower price points. The higher you get up in price, the smaller pool of buyers you have for that price point.
Yep, absolutely. And I think you made a couple of really good points there is, it can by segment, right? Like, certain price points may move differently than other price points. I think there's still a ton of activity when you get into those price points that are achievable for a lot of first-time home buyers.
Right.
Still very active, highly competitive. When you get in more to the executive, probably, higher end homes. Like you said, there's a smaller pool of buyers, maybe not quite as competitive. For the buyers have better opportunity, I guess is really what I'm saying.
Right. Yes. Yes, I would agree.
I think that you're seeing more of that. I also don't think that because there's a lot of people that think, oh well, we're going to see a recession in 2020, and I don't want to buy a house because I think the market's going to tank or something like that. And I'm like, I don't see that at all. We're in a very different world than what we were, in 2006.
Right.
I think, in all honesty, it's a really good time for a lot of folks that were in the market, maybe this past summer or before, that had, fatigue. They would go out and write an offer.
Oh, I remember that.
And they would lose. They would lose to 20 different offers. They
so
would
competitive
lose
at that time.
Yes, but I think for a lot of those people that gave up, now is a great time because you have prices that are, I don't want to say closer to normal, but they're maybe a little more closer to what would be a more normal market. The cost of money is dirt cheap right now.
I was going to say that it is. You can get more house.
Absolutely.
For less.
So I think for some of those people who checked out of this process of buying a house because they got tired of just the vicious competition that was out there.
Right.
I think for a lot of those people, now is a great time to kind of check back in because the cost of money is cheap. Prices are very reasonable. Yeah, there's still competition in different price points, but it's probably not as savage as what it was, when you go back, even a few months ago.
Yes, I completely agree. And I am starting to see homes on the market longer as well. So yes, I mean, things are still moving, in that more competitive price point, but you may not have to write an offer on the top of the hood of the car after you walk out of the house in order to get your offer in on time, sort of thing.
Yeah, we gotta hurry up, get it. But that, it's closer to what would be more typical of a normal type of market, I think.
Yes.
Which I think that's good for those of you who are looking to buy. It's
much more desirable time for buyers right now than it was last year, the year before. That was tough.
Yeah, I would agree because I think just the overall cost of money, something that's a little more resemblance of a more normal kind of marketplace. I think it's a great time to be able to jump in, kind of maximize what you can buy by having a cheaper cost of money than what you would have even had 6 months ago. So good time for maybe people to kind of check back into this process and start to explore their options.
You bet.
If you have somebody who's looking to sell, kind of going into the fall, any advice that's maybe different for somebody who's looking to sell kind of going into the fall, before the holidays versus somebody who would traditionally list in the spring? Does it make more sense to wait to the spring? Does it not make more sense? What kind of thoughts would you have there?
I get asked this question often, but which is definitely a fair question. I would say there is usually definitely a stint of busyness and real estate continuing to move through the fall, for sure. Now kids are back in school and they can refocus. It is typically quiet between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah.
It just is. Not that real estate doesn't move then, but it is a little bit quieter. If you are thinking of selling right now, or do you wait until the spring and trying to make that decision, I would say you have less competition as far as homes coming on the market in the fall. So I don't think that it's a bad time. And the people that are looking tend to be more serious and in the market to purchase versus the ones in the spring where they can kind of be tire kickers, just out exploring, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite as serious. And I would take a serious buyer at fewer showings any day of the week than lots of showings with people that aren't actually in a position to buy.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense because you have people who truly could pull the trigger and move forward. So you have a much more committed buyer.
Yes.
Looking in the fall than maybe somebody who's I'll just look at 100 houses and see where it goes.
Right. You do have professional lookers out there.
No.
Yes, you do.
I feel like I've got a couple of those people that have been pre-approved. I think I got one guy that's been pre-approved for like 3 years. And his agent is like a really good friend of his. And he's like, he's coming back around. I'm like, nah, there's no way, man. I mean, if this guy buys a house ever, like, I'm going to be surprised. The thing is well qualified, super great guy to work with. But I'm like, I kind of feel like I don't know that you really want to buy a house.
And I would say to that if you're looking for the perfect home, it does not exist. Period.
True. You know what?
There
it's
will
so true.
always be something. And even if you build a home,
it's so true.
To build the perfect dream home, you will move in and be like, I wish I would have done this or that or next time.
Yeah.
There's always something. So the perfect home doesn't exist. So don't wait for that because you might lose out a few times along the way.
That is so true. I mean, as I finished my second house, first house, I had them same thoughts. This house, I have them same thoughts as well. I'm like, I wish I would have did
and
this different.
And you haven't even moved in yet.
I know. Isn't that terrible? So I'm like, I have them same thoughts, You work with a lot of builders. Maybe talk about that. What do you think about that as an alternative for somebody who maybe can't find a house? There's lots of opportunities. Or what do you kind of see in, as far as, what builders are doing? Are they putting up more homes, more spec homes? What opportunity does that give somebody who's looking to buy versus maybe something that's existing?
Great question. I love new construction. I've always had an interest in that since I've been in real estate. Obviously, the perk of building is being able to get what you want. Now, you may be able to get what you want in new construction, but a resale is always going to be a better bang for your buck. It just is. You're going to get more square footage finished than you would in new construction. But new is new, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about the roof. You don't have to worry about the furnace. Definitely some perks of new construction. I think it's an exciting process going through it, and you just have so much ownership and seeing it grow. It's like a child, you just kind of see them go through the different stages of life. So I think new construction's very exciting, but I have to say that the cost of new construction and the labor and the materials are not coming down in price, and the builders don't see them coming down in price. Those are only going to go up. So it is not cheap to build, but it's exciting. But, if you can't find what you want on the market, that's definitely a great option to go with. And there are, I'm going to say you're probably about 8-ish months for building, with the entire process. And Dan, I have to say, gosh, and this is just from experience, amazing with construction loans. And this is the place to come for construction loans. And again, buyers don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And the builders I work with would also push them to you just because of their experience with other lenders and banks and that sort of thing. So construction loans, Dan, is for sure the way to go. There are some builders that would hold the construction loan for you. You close at the end, which is a great option for some people. But yes, I would say a majority of the builders out there have buyers do a construction loan.
Yeah, and it's it's a specialized area of lending. You either get it or you don't.
Yes.
And I can tell you that not everybody who says they do construction loans gets it. We deal with a lot of transactions that start one place and they end up here because we were able to put it together the right way. I like I like the idea of new construction when it works for somebody. And it fits them. Sometimes it doesn't, and I too agree that you can get more bang for your buck, when you can buy an existing home. And I looked before building. I looked, would look online. Never saw anything that I even had interest in having you show me, because I'm like,
yeah.
I think I drove by one house and from the outside I'm like, nah, I'm not interested.
Yeah, and it's a timing juggle, right? Depends. Are you, can you purchase without selling, which is something definitely to meet with Dan about and go through. Can you do a bridge loan? Do you have to move back in with mom and dad? You can't believe how often that happens. And now you have 2 kids and a dog that you're coming back home with. But it happens, or finding a rental in the interim. So the timing of new construction is definitely something to factor in as well.
And this, it all kind of, buttons up together, kind of going back to where we started, you take the time to listen to what's going on with your clients. You take the time to kind of understand where they're at, what really maybe they need that maybe they don't even know that they need, and are able to propose solutions and options that, they may not have thought about, or give them a roadmap to maybe accomplish what they're ultimately after, but maybe they just didn't have a clear way of being able to see how they were going to get there. But that's part of why I love working with you, because you take that time to really understand your clients and to really put those pieces together in a way that works for your clients, as opposed to some agents that don't. They're just very, I'm going to try to get this transaction done, and I'm not trying to paint with a wide brushstroke, because there's a lot of good agents out there that do an awesome job.
Yes, there.
I think it's important for clients to take the time to really vet the person, to understand what's their history, what's their experience, how well do they understand all of these different aspects of the market, whether it's new construction or it's an existing home, because new construction is a specialized area. You either understand it and understand how all those pieces work and, work well with the builder to kind of coordinate all those pieces, or you don't. And I see a lot of agents that, don't really understand new construction like you do, where you're well versed in all these different areas where you can help somebody get across the finish line and, figure out, what really is the best option that works for them, as part of what they're doing.
One thing I want to say is, just sitting here listening to you say that makes me think maybe I've come up with the new tagline: Rebecca Perkins, Realtor problem solver. That's what it is. You were talking about that earlier. It's like a puzzle. Here's my life. Here's what I want to do. How do I get there?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell our staff time and time again, we get paid to solve problems, and sometimes they're problems that folks don't even know that they have. It's like, okay, you want to do this, but here's the 6 reasons why that's going to be a problem.
Yes, you deal with it every day.
That you didn't even know. And so my job is to say, okay, how do I clear those 6 hurdles, in the best way for the client, where it's the best overall outcome for them. Sometimes it's easier said than done, right?
Right.
It can be a fair amount of work.
That's what we're here for, though.
But, in all honesty, that's the stuff that I think you and me both thrive on. Like, I thrive on being able to be like, yeah, we got this put together for this client, took good care of them, made all these pieces work, and the outcome was, ideally better than what they were hoping for. That is the stuff that, still gives me a lot of excitement about what we do. Where it's not a transaction. I have a client right now, a really interesting client, doesn't like to, follow, the roadmap we're giving him. He keeps going off the roadmap.
Creating his own roadmap.
Oh my gosh. He keeps, every time I turn around, it's not one of your clients, it's somebody else's, but every time we turn around, it's like, you're not sticking to the game plan. Like, you're making this harder and harder, and you can get frustrated, sometimes with that. But, the end reminder I always remind myself is that, this is a single dad that has 4 kids. This is their house. This is where they live. This is where they're going to do life. It's not to lose sight of the big picture, to be like, okay, even as frustrating as sometimes, some clients can be, is still remembering that, these are real people with real lives that
Right.
we have a really big impact on. And, it's remembering that we have a job to do to serve them and take care of them. Even though sometimes that job can be frustrating,
Right.
it's not losing
Absolutely.
sight
Mm-hmm.
of what we're doing and why we do it. And, we're both passionate about what we do, about doing, a good job for our clients. And I think it shows in the results of what we do for folks. Last question for you. So when you look out over the course of, your housing crystal ball.
I love it. I keep it up on a pedestal.
We won't hold you to this, but I mean, what do you kind of see, looking, if you look out going into the, the next, let's say 12 months or so, what do you kind of see, playing out, in the, maybe kind of greater Lakeshore region here, in West Michigan?
I would say that I still see the market moving fine. I think interest rates probably pretty desirable, being able to borrow money at a cheaper rate, which is always a good thing. I would say, it may be a little bit slower than it was last year, but I think that that's okay.
Yep.
I think the people, like you had mentioned, the buyers that were so frustrated, got out of the market, I think that I think we've already started to see them appear and come back into the market, to be able to have a second chance at it. I think people that are still going to want to move, that was an issue as well, is, okay, I can get a great price for my house. I'm ready to sell, but I'm afraid I'm not going to find a house is the problem.
Exactly.
And that I don't think is going to be as big of a problem, which may give sellers a little bit more confidence in selling their home, that they're going to find something. So that's what I would say.
I think it's going to be much closer to what would traditionally be more of a normal market, right?
Yes, I would agree with that.
I don't think, I think, what happened is, for these last couple of years, we really saw this, abnormal market where it was clearly a seller's market. We saw things that, in all honesty, when I look back, over my 28, 29 years of doing this, I didn't see a ton of hey, there's 20 offers on this property. I'm trying to think of, when the last time was I saw that, if ever. So we have this really abnormal, seller's market with a lot of pent up demand, and you couldn't get enough inventory. There weren't enough houses to sell. I still think that there's probably still some of that, different price points. But I also think that, it's starting to drift closer to normal, which I think is good for everybody, because, you can't have 20 offers in every property and sustain that kind of growth for any long period of time. Because, usually what happens is, you have so much appreciation that it starts to, push people out of the market because they can't afford to buy.
Yes.
Which long term, that ends up being a bad thing.
Absolutely.
And that's part of what you saw in parts of Florida where they had, 25% appreciation over 3 months. Well, that's not sustainable because at some point the average person that lives there can't afford to buy a house there.
Right.
And then sooner or later the market just goes the wrong way, where, more level, appreciation is sustainable. And, and that's kind of what we've seen, I think, here in West Michigan is something that's more, we've seen really good appreciation. I think we're going to continue to see that. I think it'd just be a little more normal.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Which is good, which is good because it's sustainable and it's a sign of a healthier market. So I think there's definitely a good opportunity for those of you who haven't bought yet. There's still plenty of cheap money out there, plenty of options. For those of you who have a house to sell and you're thinking about buying something else, and maybe what Rebecca was just talking about, which is just the concern of what do I do if I sell my house and I can't find one to buy. Much more of a regular, probably time to do that. So how does somebody who wants to buy or sell a house in the greater West Michigan area get in contact with you?
Yes, definitely reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you out and walk you through the process. And I will be honest with you, and I will hold your hand and guide you. But yes, reach out, Rebecca at RebeccaPerkinsHomes.com, and Rebecca is REBECCA. Again, that's Rebecca at RebeccaPerkinsHomes.com. Or reach me via text 616-218-6161.
Perfect. And I am Dan Moralez from Northpointe Bank. NMLS number is 709729. You can find me online at danmoralez.com. That's DANMORALEZ.com, or phone number 616-931-4629. Hey, thanks for listening. Do me a favor. If you enjoy the podcast, make sure you leave a review, share it with your friends and family, and help us to grow our audience. And hopefully you find the content of the podcast worthwhile and beneficial to you. Hey, thanks for listening. And remember, Northpointe Bank is an equal housing lender. Have a great day.